Hello, welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is Great Big History Podcast. And we are kind of starting over with women, war, and trauma at the start of human society. Human life and existence is full of trauma and the fight for survival. 5 million years ago, hominids began walking, bipedal walking on two legs. We were also kicked out of the forest to the grasslands. We are not successful. If we had been successful, if our ancestors had been successful, they would have stayed in the forest. Instead, they were kicked out. They lost. They went to the grasslands where they had to adapt. They had to change. Even their diet had to change from soft fruits to nuts and roots. So the story of humans is twofold. It is a story of movement and the story of trauma. And that trauma is the lost home, lost food, even your lost body. Even the teeth had to change in order to better eat nuts and roots, away from the soft fruits of the forest and the jungle. Everything had to change. We lost everything as we evolved. And so our evolutionary adaptation means humans move and we change. And we don't live very long. We live about 40 or so years. That would be old. So if you reached 40, you were old. If you reached 50, you were very old. If you reached 60, you were ancient. And if you reached 70, and this is true even in the Roman period, if you reached 70, you were so old, you got old put in your name. People, there was no one around who remembered you as a child if you reached 70. Augustus lives to be like 72, and he outlives like 3 or 4 generations of his family. So humans don't live very long because it's hard. It is hard. Two, humans are migrants. We're immigrants wherever we have gone. We are not the native species anywhere because we were kicked out of the place we were a native species. So wherever we go, we're immigrants. And that always puts us at a disadvantage versus native species. You move to the grasslands, well, cheetahs can run faster than you. Elephants are bigger than you. Try to catch an antelope, thank you, as they hop away from you or gore you with their horns. Lions and hyenas will eat your kids. You were way safer in the forest, but you got kicked out of it by the ancestors that would become the gorillas and the orangutans and the chimpanzees. We lost. So we're at a disadvantage when we go to these new places. So we had to change. And the biggest change that we do is two-legged walking. Move farther, move on distance. We have, one of our great advantages is stamina. We just keep going and going and going. You can walk 20 miles a day if you wanted to. As long as you have a little bit of food and you have water, you can keep moving. We have moved across the entire planet. There are not that many animals that do that. Whales do that, and they are far bigger than us. Sharks can do that. Some kinds of birds migrate that far. from one end of the earth or near one end of the earth to the other. But most animals don't. But humans have gone to every part of the world. Wherever you can go on earth, a human has been there. The second thing we do is get bigger brains. We evolve bigger brains to better adapt to a new environment. Our body is not very good. It's weak compared to other animals. We're slow compared to other animals. We have no fur to keep us warm. We have no sharp teeth. We can't crack bones. We can't swing from trees. There are animals at every level who are better at everything than we are. Except one, the size of our brains in relation to the proportion to our body. But that creates a problem. And that problem is women's biggest problem. Women's biggest problem is the problem that comes out of humans' greatest advantage. Walking upright equals narrowing of your hips. And then you add big-brained babies to that, and you have an obstetrical dilemma. Women cannot deliver alone. Whereas cats, dogs, primates, they go off. They leave the group to go deliver. They deliver by themselves. Women, on the other hand, here's one statue from ancient India, another from ancient Egypt. You'll notice women are being helped by other women. You're not supposed to deliver alone because you really can't do it. If you ever hear of a woman delivering a baby by herself, so much has gone wrong. And you are in that woman is in extreme danger. The most dangerous thing a woman will do in her life, ladies who are listening to this, is deliver a baby. It is dangerous childbirth. In nomadic societies that are the best relationship we have to the earliest humans is about a 14% death rate. Whereas it's a 1 to 2% death rate in the world today. 14%. That's more than 1 in 10. 1 in 10 births, not people, births. So you have a 10%, more than 10%, you have a 14% chance. That's higher, by the way, than Russian roulette, which comes in somewhere around a 13% chance or so. So every time you give birth, you're playing essentially Russian roulette. And then you go through that to give birth to a helpless child. Basically, the child we give birth to, women give birth to, so a man I don't give birth, is helpless. It is simply a vessel for that brain. That brain is as big as it can be and still fit through the birth canal and still come out. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't come out. And it kills the mother. It dies in childbirth. The child dies in childbirth. Terrible things happen. 40% of children in early humanity died before the age of 15. Mostly from diseases, but also nutrition, and then the dangers of the world. Humans grow up in a dangerous world. So you need a society to gather food, to help raise and protect children, to explain the death and the trauma. When you have, just go and watch The Deer Hunter. which has Russian roulette as a major component for its characters, and see how damaged they are. How do you explain this? Well, you need stories. You need rituals to explain this death and this trauma and why you survived, but somebody else didn't. Or why you survived this time, but not the next time. So we need a society. Women need to be surrounded by other women. And from the very beginning, that's how we constructed societies. All right, so dealing with pregnancy. Pregnancy is the worst thing to happen to people. It's the worst thing that happened to women. It leads to sickness. You know, just morning sickness is such a cliche, is so ordinary that it's not even considered a big deal. And yet it leads to less movement, less calorie intake for the group. Your body changes, which makes you helpless to predators. An 8-month pregnant woman is not going to be able to outrun a bunch of hyenas. Miscarriage and birth can lead to possible death. And so abortion and infanticide were always part of pregnancy. Ending pregnancies, especially bad ones, especially ones that made the woman sick, that might cost the health of the mother, or children who could not survive. Ending that life was always part of human society. It's always been part of it because it's always been part of pregnancy. There's always percentages where things go badly. So elder women pass down knowledge. Herbal teas, spells, acts, dance under the full moon. Right? From the New York Times, toxic and ineffective. Experts warn against herbal abortion remedies on TikTok. Now that in many states, abortions are legally harder to obtain, women aren't stopping. It's just like it was in the 50s. They're going to find other ways. And not just the 1950s, but the 1450s, the 1050s. And so herbal abortion remedies, herbal teas, spells, acts. Female magic is important in explaining the world. That's Ursula. Right? What does Ursula do in The Little Mermaid? She casts spells for young people who need things. She changes bodies. We see this also in Brave as well. Female magic for other women to change their bodies. Food. How do people gain food? Hunting and gathering. Really, it's gathering and hunting we should talk about, because the G comes first. And these are groups of about 50 to 100 people. These are relatively small groups. Men mostly hunted in small groups. Young women gathered the fruits, the roots, and the nuts. The older folk protected the children and did the work around the camp. Mobility, again, matters. The ability to move, because the animals aren't going to stay close. They're going to leave. So you have to be able to track them, follow them, find them. As older folks and their knees hurt and their elbows hurt and their backs hurt and they can't go as far, they move into jobs that are useful for society. This is a communist society. Everyone is contributing and everyone is gaining. Women brought in more calories. That's really why it's gathering and hunting, because women brought in more calories. Women's labor is important. Why? Well, very simply, animals don't want to be caught and turned into food. So while berries, and many berries do want to be eaten, they want to be eaten so that their seeds go through you, come out of you, and get left behind, and then they can grow. Animals don't want to be eaten. There's no deer out there that wants to be turned into venison. And so women's calories are way more regular. They're way more dependable. While men's calories, the proteins and the meats, may be technically better calories, but you're less likely to get them because it's harder. You could go out hunting. I've gone out hunting and come back with nothing. You spend 8 hours of labor and get nothing. That happens all the time. So since women's labor is important, what happens? Women have rights over their body. They have a veto over their marriage choice, and they're able to dissolve unworkable marriages. This idea that, people only married, they married for a lifetime. No. It's just not. Relationships break up all the time. All the time. How do we know? Because from the very beginning of literature, from the very beginning of people writing stuff down, relationships are ending. They're breaking up. They're ending over not liking each other. They're ending over death. They're always ending. So women have rights over their body, especially who's going to be the father of their children, who they're going to have sex with. They have a veto right over marriage and are able to dissolve unworkable marriages. Plus, women are an important authority within these societies. They have knowledge men don't have. They're counselors, midwives, doctors, priestesses. They can be warriors. They can be leaders. As they get older, if they survive into their 40s, their 50s, they're even more important because they're also the historian. They're the archivist. They're the law. They remember how things used to be. They are institutional knowledge in a world before writing. So early society and its organization. It's communism, as I talked about. And I know people are going to hate it, but it is communism. Now, what kind of communism? This is Jesus's loaves and fishes, not Marxism or Mao. So that's an important distinction. It is not 20th century's idea of communism. But you have to understand, when someone says communism has never worked, it in fact is the only economic system we had. For the first 4 million years, humans existed. So let's define communism. Everyone contributes to the best of their ability. Plus, everyone receives what they need. So the young men go and hunt. The old women watch the kids. The old men fix up baskets. Middle-aged women help deliver babies. Well, if you're delivering a baby, you can't go out and collect food. Should you not eat? No. Of course you're going to eat. So the people who collect the food are going to bring it back so that you spent the day helping deliver a baby also get the food you need. Everyone receives. There's no private ownership of food or goods or even children. Whose children are they? They're the tribe's children. They're the group's children. They're everyone's children. Everyone's an auntie. And those of you who live in non-isolated or non-nuclear families, you might have lots of aunties who tell you what to do. And those aunties are not always blood relations. They're your mom's best friend from when she was 4. And she still tells you what to do or takes you out to go see the movies or something. You may have, and through history, most young women had better relationships with the women on the outskirts of their family. Aunts and cousins and friends of family than they did with their own parents. Early society's organization was a we more than an I. We is more important than I. And so communism works. To say, when people get on TV and go, communism has never worked, it just makes my brain hurt. Because it's how we lived for about 4 to 5 million years. It's how most animals live. So their definition of communism is basically some 20th century Stalinist gulag concept. And that's not what it is. What communism is Jesus and the loaves and the fishes, Jesus and the wine. Notice many of Jesus' miracles are him giving things to everybody and then not charging. Even salvation, even the resurrection is communism. Why? Because nobody makes money. Jesus doesn't charge. Jesus doesn't make a profit off the resurrection, off salvation. At no point in any of the Gospels does he ever say, give me money and I'll give you a thing. No. And then he says, it's for everyone. Everybody. And you can see why early Christians lived in communist societies. They gave up their possessions. They gave it to the church is effectively communist, where the monks live take a vow of poverty. And yet somehow they get food, drink, beer, a place to sleep, even some income for individual goods. It's effectively communism. But understand this. These societies are poor, small, and have little surplus. And we're going to see that makes a difference. Communism works for millions of years. Humans are communist. Capitalism is 500 years old. Private ownership is maybe somewhere around 6,000 to 8,000 years old. Communism is millions of years old. But humans were also poor, in small groups that knew each other, and they had little surplus. Storytelling and culture. There is no writing. There's no writing because there's no education. There's no settlement. You're always on the move. And so we're talking oral traditions. No writing. Which means old people matter. In Game of Thrones, there's the Dothraki women who say, it is known. It is known. It is known. Well, it's common sense. We all know this. The storyteller, whether an old woman or an old man, was as important as the leader and the priests. They explained, they're the philosophers, they're the scientists. They explained, and they're the historians, they explained how the world works. So you get a lot of nature parables and animal fables. Why? Because these people live in nature and they live among animals. So they go, you know how the frog croaks? And then they explain why the frog croaks and the way it croaks. Why the wind blows. Why it gets cold in the winter and warm in the summer. And what a lot of these stories do is try to explain how society is supposed to work. We do this. We do this all the time. We do this through plays. We do this through musicals. We do this through art. We do this through music. Right? Think about Taylor Swift's music. She is constantly telling you how you're not supposed to be treated. She's constantly making songs about being treated badly and then telling you about how she's being treated badly. Why? So that the listener has an idea that they don't want to be treated like that. That treatment isn't right. So stories and art are incredibly important in explaining how the world works, but also what is your role in it. So a lot of these stories are about working together versus alone, and the working together is way more important. Remember, these are societies that depend on each other. So egalitarianism versus individuality. The person who's alone is selfish. The person who gathers all the fruit but keeps it to themselves, is that a good person or a bad person? In this society, that's a bad person. Also, stories of gender equality, despite differences. Yes, men and women are different. Oh, and by the way, there are other genders. There have always been other genders. And the reason why is sometimes things happen. There's XXYs and XXs, XX, no, they're XXs, women, but there's chromosomal changes. Not everybody looks exactly the same. And so there's always been groups of whether they're eunuchs or a third gender or a fourth gender. There's always been. And those people were always equal despite their differences because their labor is just as important to the success of everyone. These stories emphasize egalitarianism. They emphasize gender equality. They explain a little bit of science, how the world works, and a lot of ethics. Your proper behavior. So, one fairly universal story that we see all over the world is the sun and the moon fight to illuminate the earth. But if there's too much sun, the plants will wither and the animals grow thirsty. Too much moon and the land grows cold, the animals shiver and the plants wither. So what they do is rather than wrestle over their importance of who is better, they share. And this explains the seasons through the year. What does this do for ethics? Well, what does it do for science? It explains the seasons, right? We just said that. It explains why is it cold in the winter and hot in the summer. But what does it do for ethics? It says competition is okay, but as long as it doesn't hurt the group, as long as it's within bounds, within a balance. Also, agreement is good. You decide to share, just like the sun and the moon. And are you more important than the sun and the moon? No. No, you're not more important than the sun and the moon. So agreement is good. Balance is good. Negotiation is good. Because too much of one thing, and this is Aristotle's going to say this, moderation in all things. Too much of one thing is bad, even moderation. You just have to find the balance. And so that's the point of this parable of the sun and the moon. It explains how we get days and we get nights and we get seasons, but also is telling you how to behave. Competition is okay. There are rules. There are boundaries. Balance and agreement are good. Okay, leadership and legitimacy. Leaders lead by example. This is personal leadership, not institutional. There is no constitution. There is no institution called the leader. It is a person, and people go, that's the leader. It relies on kinship. Who are you related to? If you're related to Edgar the Great or Catherine the Strong, you're more likely to be the next leader than if you are related to the goat thief. Yeah, the goat thief. So who's going to want to follow a goat thief? Who's going to want to marry a goat thief? Who's going to want to marry the kid of a goat thief, right? So it relies on kinship, but also charisma. People have to want to follow you. People have to like you, just not because of what you do for them, but just because of who you are, just because of that inner something we call charisma that people are just drawn to. They just like you because they like you. There's also moral character. You have to say what you're going to do and do what you say. This is, John Wayne characters in the John Ford Westerns. They may be nice. They may be good. They may not be good. They may be violent. They may be terrible people, but they have moral character. When one of these guys says, I am going to get back my niece, he's going to do it. And everybody knows he's going to do it. That's why in The Searchers, everyone's afraid. Everyone's afraid of what John Wayne's character is going to do once he does rescue his niece. Because he's said, basically, in every way he's acting, he's going to kill his niece. And since he has this moral character, this moral strength, when he says it, they believe it. And that's the tension. You have to watch The Searchers, and you always have to know he's going to kill his niece. So the real race is, can Jeffrey Hunter or someone else get to the niece first? Survival of the group equals legitimacy. So these are conservative groups. Nomadic peoples are conservative. Consensus, not gender, matters. So if people agree a woman should be leader, she's leader. This is the way it is. No one goes, oh, she's a woman. She's got whatever magic sauce you need, she's got it. Because survival is important. Not violence, not battle. Though battle is going to be a part of it, and we'll talk about that. But survival is more important. And if you ever read The Art of War, Sun Tzu's Art of War, The Art of War is really about avoiding war. It's a great title for the wrong book. Because The Art of War is to not get into a war. But if you're going to fight one, then you have to win it. And that's Sun Tzu's genius. Is how to win it. And then he'll argue to win it without actually having to fight. To win it before you ever fight. But that goes back to this. Survival equals legitimacy. So these societies are conservative. They don't like change. Change is dangerous. Going into the new mountain passes is dangerous. Going down into a new valley can be dangerous. You don't know what's there. So change is dangerous. Advantage. You get good leadership because you don't have time for bad leadership. Bad leadership can lead to disaster. So if people don't believe, if they don't have confidence in the leader, he is either going to get exiled or executed real fast. The disadvantage is there's no clear successor. People die all the time. They die of disease. Khal Drogo dies of disease. You have a high turnover. There's instability. What happens in Game of Thrones to the Khalasar? It breaks up when Khal Drogo dies. The same thing happened to Attila the Hun. He had probably a brain aneurysm, given the description of his death. He probably had a brain aneurysm while he slept. And he had two brothers who both claimed to be the new leader, the new Hun lord. And half of the group went one way, half of the group went the other way for one brother and the other brother, and it broke up. It broke into pieces. So the disadvantage of having a personal style of leadership is the instability. There's no clear successor. War. If you're a Fallout fan, you know the phrase that starts several of the games, which is war never changes. And in this class, it does, but war is always a trauma. The methods of war do change, but the results of war do not. It is always a trauma. It kills a lot of people, and it hurts either physically and or emotionally those who survive. In nomadic societies, war is a competition for food, not control of land. Remember, you're always on the move, looking for food. You're following the animals. You're following the seasons. So war is if you're going to fight somebody, you're fighting them over control of food that you'll then eat until it no longer exists, and then you'll have to move. Which means victory is not about controlling land. It's not about controlling people. It's about eradicating the competition. It is about genocide. It is about wiping out the entire tribe who might compete with you for food. Because your people need the food. And if they don't get the food, they'll starve. This is the part, whenever I see a book that comes out, and they come out every couple of years, of somebody being like, well, you know, when we were nomads and before we had farms, everyone was great and life was wonderful and we found food in 20 minutes. Well, you found food in 20 minutes, but the people over the other hill are discovering that the food you found in 20 minutes, they need. They always leave out war. And yet nomadic peoples' lives are full of war. It's amazing. It's absolutely stunning. Every time I see these books, and there's no chapter on war. There's no section on what war's like. They just think it's sitting there eating grapes underneath the sun. And if we just didn't farm, everything would have been great. No, you'd be dead. How do I know? Because there are no more nomadic peoples on Earth. Everyone's been settled. Everyone's been conquered by settled peoples. And even the settled peoples have been conquered by industrialized people. That's a 102 topic. But that's the world we live in. So what kind of genocide are we talking about? What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about killing all the men. They're useless. The men are useless. Why would you take them? Why would you capture them? They might revolt. They'll seek revenge. They were leading their tribe. Now they're going to be a slave? No, they're never going to be a slave. They're not going to accept it. This is, in fact, the slave owner's dilemma. Every slave society understands, and we'll talk about a few of them, right? We'll talk about the Assyrians. We'll talk about the Spartans. They all have the same problem. They have to go to sleep sometime, and their slaves have knives. And the idea is very easy. The people who own slaves, who enslave other people never want to be slaves. And so they are terrified of the slave revolt. So what do? You kill all the men. You kill the men. Easy. You defeated them. Now you just slit their throats. Done. Move on. And then you marry off the women. You don't kill the women of the tribe that you defeated. You take their women and you marry them off to new husbands. Why? Well, because your tribe is always losing women. They're losing women to disease. They're losing women to childbirth. Women do not outlive men. I've seen these things and it just blows my mind where they're like, these YouTube dudes, and they're like, nature makes women live longer than men. No, that's a modern concept. That is a once we figured out how to make childbirth not kill women, then women start to live as long as men. But if you were to look at insurance, health insurance rates, life insurance rates, in like the 19th century, women are way more expensive than men. Way more expensive. Today, it's the opposite. But back in the 19th century, it was like, oh, you have a 22-year-old wife? Oh, yeah, she's going to die. She is not living to be 40 years old. So your life insurance is going to cost a lot for her. So women are always dying. And so war is a way of gaining new women. So you marry these women off to new husbands to replace the loss of childbirth and disease. This is problematic because this is non-consensual sex. These women are being married off to men they did not choose, who they, definitely do not like, because they're men who probably had something to do with the death of their husbands. And we see this in Dances with Wolves, with Stands with Fist, a white woman who is in a native tribe, who has a native husband. At least when the movie starts, the husband will die. But what is she? Yes, she is of a different group who has been brought into this tribe non-consensually, but she becomes a citizen of it. Her children are citizens of it. So while, yes, rape is part of this, our modern definition of rape, all of this is rape. Right? It is non-consensual sex. But the gain, the give, the other side of that coin for women is that they live, but also become part of the tribe as a citizen, as a full member. Their children will be full members. And in a generation, no one will remember that they weren't part of the tribe from the very beginning. The third is to children who are captured. They are used as slave labor. They're used as slave labor, and then they'll be incorporated into the tribe. Why? Because as children, they don't eat that much. They can't do much, but they don't eat much. So what jobs do they do? Like feeding horses, or taking the shepherds, taking care of the sheep or the goats, feeding the goats. Things that grown men or grown women don't want to do. Counting out the grapes, or organizing the roots, or simple tasks that take time and energy and routine. Perfect for children. And so they're basically used as slave labor, because their labor is more important than the food that they'll eat. Remember, food intake is always the problem. Again, why we kill the men, right? Whereas captured children don't eat that much. And their labor can save more time so that more people, more adults can do more efficient work. So then what happens? Well, they're going to grow from 8 or 10 into teenagers and then into adults. Now they become 18, 19, 22. That's a problem because now they're strong. And so you can't keep them as slaves. It's too hard. Again, you'd have to use violence. You'd have to use control. You'd have to always watch them. It's too hard in these societies. They're not that big. They're not wealthy. They need all the labor efficiency they can get. So what do? They incorporate them into the tribe, mostly through marriage. So just like, a Johnny Tremaine kind of apprentice marries the daughter of the shop owner. He's apprentice. He's going to be a silversmith. He's learning from the silver master how to make things, and then he marries the daughter. Well, what does that mean? It means he keeps working for the master, but one day he'll inherit the shop, and so he's now loyal. The tribe keeps the young people's loyalty and their labor. By marrying these children, these captured children, into the tribe and then incorporating them into the tribe, you replenish the tribe. Because remember, people are always dying. They're dying of old age. They're dying of accidents. They're dying of disease. And so you're able to replenish. What is the single most important thing? Don't lose. Because if you lose, that killing the men, marrying the women off to new husbands, and your children becoming slaves is what happens. So don't lose. And we're going to see this again and again and again in this course. Do not lose. If there is one rule in history, it's don't lose. Bad things happen when you lose. Horses change everything. Domesticating horses and breeding them, because some places can domesticate them, but they can't breed them. China is the perfect example of this. They're able to use horses, but never able to really have a domesticated breeding program. They're always relying on nomads for their horses. But domesticating horses meant more wealth could be carried. It's like going from a backpack to a car. The horse can carry a couple 100 pounds of stuff, which means when you move from place to place, now you could carry more, which is more savings, which is more wealth. Plus, horses can go faster and more distant than people. More distance is covered. More food can be found. Horses allow for better survival. They gain advantages in war, height and speed. Height, you're swinging down. Well, you now have momentum on your side. Speed, again, momentum. Your horse is moving at 25 miles an hour, so when you shoot the bow, not only is the bow shooting at what the strength of the bow is, what the strength of your arm is, now you add 20 miles per hour to it. So people who domesticate horses, start to obliterate non-horse peoples on the grasslands. And this is a trauma for those peoples. We see that happen in the Americas as well. When white people show up on the coast of North America, none of those people have horses. None of them. Because horses are not native to North or South America. But by the time America is spreading out to the west, to the plains, they're running into the horse lords. They're running into the horse natives, the horse Indians, which will become the cowboys and Indians, right? The Sioux and the Cheyenne and the Apache, all the ones that you know, the famous Midwestern Native American tribes that you know, are probably all ones that took on horses that they got from Spain, that they got from Mexico. And they pushed non-horse peoples into like the Badlands. The Blackfeet get pushed into the Badlands, for example. So you get a great clearing out of Central Asia, of Central North America, of nomadic peoples when the horse comes in. So what is the result of horses and horse nomads on human geography? Horse lords dominate the grasslands known as the steppe, S-T-E-P-P-E. Think Wyoming. It's the great flat grasslands of Central Asia, from northern China all the way to like Hungary in Central Europe. That's a giant highway for horses. Non-horse peoples get concentrated into worse food areas, mountains and forests and river valleys for protection, because the horses need food. So while horses can go into mountains and go into forests, they can't really stay. And river valleys are full of mud. There's no grass there. This is mud. So non-horse peoples get pushed into places for security that horsed people don't really want to go into, don't like to go into. And so the rest of this course is going to see competition between those who live nomadically and those who don't. And those who don't, those who settle in a place, are going to win. And we're going to talk about why. But for a long time, and including 2 destructions of civilizations, 2 apocalypses, the Bronze Age collapse in around 1000 BC, and then the collapse of the Classical era around 400 AD, nomadic horse peoples win. And then you can make the same argument for most of Eurasia when the Mongols do the same thing in the 1200s. They burn down China, conquer northern India, smash the Middle East, and effectively take over the largest land empire in the world, in the history of the world, as horse peoples. So we're going to see that competition happen again and again and again and pop out and come up. But eventually, and if you've ever read like Blood Meridian, you know who wins. It's fences, it's walls, it's farms, it's cities. The city wins. And that's what we're going to talk about in our next lecture. So what is the scene? You don't have to write any of this down. This is just kind of a summary. What is the scene at around 10,000 BCE? Homo sapiens, us, are the only human species left. We either killed or sexually assimilated all the other versions of humanity. In 300,000 BCE, there were 9 species on Earth. By 10,000 BCE, there's only 1. So most died out before Homo sapiens got to them, but the ones Homo sapiens did meet, we either killed or sexually assimilated. Humans wandered in small egalitarian groups searching for food. They used communal economics and consensual law. That's dominated by poor societies. We see them very often in poor societies. Women were important. They had rights. They had clear roles. Pregnancy was dangerous. Children died in massive numbers. Elders were the archive, were the knowledge archive, and important to societies. But elders weren't leaders. It was too hard on the body. You don't have a 60, 70, 80, 88-year-old person. So when you might hear today about people complaining about Congress being full of 80-year-olds, that's an anomaly in human history. Old people have always been important, but they weren't leaders because leading was too hard on the body. Stories tried to comfort people about death, disease, trauma, the world, seasons, the meaning of life. War was common, especially if climate change hurt food supplies, and war was a trauma for everyone. Domesticating the horse allowed for new advantages in wealth and war, but was only really useful on the grasslands where food for horses was plentiful. So, thank you. Be safe. We covered a lot. This is just the start of a 45 hours, so be safe. Thank you.